All right.
Yeah, you. You okay, Richard?
I am. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Are we ready to go then?
I think so.
No, hang on. Yeah, we are now. Then. Right. Have you recorded?
Yeah. Recording in progress.
Right. Okay. Good afternoon, folks. We're back again. I just had a brief look through my emails, and I see that 3 people booked on after 9 o'clock this morning. So well done. Um, hope you enjoy yourselves. Hope everybody else is too. In taking the dogs out for a walk, I just had a little bit of a think about the 2 people who asked about. One asked about Flow Hive, and the other about Lions Hive. More than happy for people to keep bees in them. I haven't got a problem with that. But because of the different techniques needed, I suggest that if you haven't bought those hives yet, that you go along to your local beekeeping association or somebody who you know. Get to handle bees first, have a look, see what's happening inside the hive, and I suggest you do at least some beekeeping on what term conventional hives first. Both of them, if you buy commercially, both of them are quite expensive. The last thing you want to do, in my view, is to get stung a time or two, realize that you don't like being stung, or you've got a reaction, and then have to give up because you've then outlaid quite a bit of money, and you've then got to recover some of it as best as you can. And certainly, second-hand value of these hives isn't going to be as great as a conventional one. So I suggest to anybody, not I'm against the hives at all, all the methods of keeping bees. I haven't got a problem with that. What I've got a problem with is the possibility of you taking on something and then may have to give up. Also, I think you'll probably learn more at a local association with conventional hive, and then by all means go down whichever route you wish. So I hope that's explained things. Right, sighting hives, which is something that most of us have to do. If we've got beehives, we've got to put them somewhere. You're probably reading books that, they must be facing the southeast to get the morning sun and all that sort of stuff. Well, it really doesn't matter. In any case, it's only applicable in the Northern Hemisphere anyway. It really doesn't matter which way they face. I've kept bees in woodlands when I had 130 colonies. I probably had 10 or a dozen different apiaries, and I had them in woodland or light woodland, in a square or oblong of 4, facing all sorts of different directions, and it really doesn't matter. So it's whatever you've got, really. What you need to do is to avoid a nuisance. That's not only to your own family, but others as well. So don't keep bees right under a window that keeps being opened, or anything like that. Or avoid footpaths if you can. If you've got a big hedge in between, it's probably okay. And if perhaps you've got a light fence between you and your neighbours, don't put the bees right up against the neighbours. But I have seen some quite daft things over the years, including a fairly light low hedge right next to a bus shelter, and somebody decided to plonk some hives down there. We used to have one of our members at Whisper Green who only had her hives as a weapon against her husband. Well, I reckon it was anyway. So yeah, be careful about it. The area needs to be fairly dry and with free flowing air. And what I mean by that is, don't have it in somewhere that's really hovered in. Otherwise, you get damp in there, especially during the winter. And as I'll explain a little bit later on, or I hope to explain a bit later on, We have one fungal disease, which is aggravated by damp air. So make sure it's free flowing, not in full sun. There's another thing that I keep hearing beekeepers should do. Oh, put your hive in full sun. It'll make them work better. It won't. It'll probably do the opposite, because the poor bees have got to spend so long trying to ventilate their hive during the sunny spells, because of course the hive is acting a bit like a radiator. And if you've got that situation, you're stressing bees out. If you stress bees out, it opens them up to all sorts of things that are not good for them, including disease. Shady woodland, as I've mentioned, is ideal, because don't forget, that's where they live naturally, in woodland. Make sure you've got room to work. If you're taking your supers off your hive, you need to put them down. Perhaps if you've got a wheelbarrow and box of tools, all sorts of things like that. You need room to work, and you need arm room as well. So although you can keep bees in very small spaces, it's going to be easier if you've got a bit more space. Make sure it's accessible too, especially if you've got bees on somebody else's land, which is technically called an out apiary. Make sure you're not climbing over barbed wire fences, stiles, muddy ditches, stone walls, all sorts of things like that, because supers, when they're lighter, when they're empty, are a lot lighter than when they are full. Make sure your hives are stable too, that they're on stands that are not going to tip over, and they are they're fairly level as well. And remember that thorns damage veils. So if you've got anything hanging over, hawthorn or bramble or something like that, they can damage a veil. You get a hole in a veil, and of course you're going to end up with bees inside. So make sure that all that area is sort of trimmed away. So some typical places you can keep bees. This is one of our members, Whisper Green members. His neighbour built a swimming pool, almost filled the garden up as it happened, but he then complained about the bees being next door, so a member had to avoid conflict, had to find somewhere else. Went around the local farms and found this lovely little area behind one of the buildings. There's actually a road the other side of the hedge here. And beyond that is the derelict Way and Arran Canal, but let's not worry about that. But it's a fairly well-used side road. There's a hedge up here, absolutely no problem. Bees are facing the hedge. They see this sheet of corrugated iron that he put there, roofing sheet. The bees see this straight up, no trouble to people on the road, and away they go. A nice little area. And in exchange for a few jars of honey a year, it's no problem. This is an odd corner at the bottom of an orchard of a big house. The gate isn't used, just a couple of hives there, and they're right out of the way. There's no mowing or anything around them. Absolutely fine. This is in a fairly small garden. The beekeeper is very competent, good beekeeper, so he's obviously okay. If you've got a small garden and you are a beginner, you need to make sure that you do what you should do to your bees at the right time. You know what you're doing. Otherwise, in a small garden, of course, if your bees start swarming, which I'll be talking about later this afternoon, then then you do run the risk of falling out with your neighbours. But Mike had about 6 hives in quite a small garden there. This photograph I like because the bees are through that little gate there. They can't come out this way when they're flying, So what they do is they just go, they've got a little flight path straight up through those bushes and trees, out of the way. I believe there were 4 neighbours there, 3 or 4 neighbours, and they were absolutely the bees were no problem with anyone else as well. If you look down the bottom, there's a little baby walker, and they had, when I took a photograph, they had 2 children, 1 2 and 1 5. And the children were playing in the garden, no trouble at all. It's nothing to do with beekeeping, but I thought to myself, my children, when they were young, had a little baby walker like that. I'll go online and see if they're still available. No, you can't buy them these days, can you? No, they're all flashy things for people with a lot more money than I had. This is a family garden, which is actually quite typical. I'm standing on the path outside the back door. And have you spotted the black Labrador? Because it's getting a little bit closer to hives than my 2 border collies do. Anyway, with all of these hives, they're all facing inwards. Now, that could mean that anywhere up here, you're going to have bees at head height, which could be a problem. All you need to do is something like that, is just face them round, turn them around, facing the hedge, so they see the hedge and they go straight up, out over the top, no trouble at all. I'm not saying that person had any problems, but try and reduce what you possibly can. 2 WBCs there, and the rest are nationals of varying kinds. This is a wall garden that was being renovated, and the gardener and the various helpers weren't very keen on the bees being there. So just a little bit of a framework and some plastic netting, greenhouse shading, I think it is. Bees go straight out, no trouble at all. So it doesn't take very much to turn what might not on the face of it be a particularly good site into quite a good one. This is a Whisper Green Teaching Apiary again, and I use this photograph a lot because of the dappled sunshine. As the sun moves around, the sun isn't on any of these hives any more than 10 minutes or so. So they're not going to warm up and stress the bees. The bees generally fly out through the holes in the canopy. But if we do put hives up against the hedge there, they fly out in that gap there, which did cause a bit of a problem to the farm workers. But we got over that by agreeing that the hedge would be higher in the future. So, you can do all sorts of things. These are at the bottom of my garden. They've got nice stable stands, or I have just 2 concrete blocks, one there, on end, with a stake either side to stop them doing the windscreen wiper effect, and a couple of rails going across that way. I can stand 2 hives on there, anything I want to in the middle. And the great thing about it is I can stand in the space and handle my bees. There's room behind to put the supers, and that works absolutely fine. So this hive I can stand there. These 2 I can stand in the middle, and the one on the end I can stand there, and they work fine for me. You probably hear quite a bit about, you mustn't keep bees anywhere near animals. Well, I think there's only on 3 occasions rather, that I've heard of a problem. One is when some horses ended up jumping in a pond and got drowned. But I have no proof, but I understand from beekeepers in the locality that it was really bad beekeeping that caused the problem. And the other case was some chickens. Two cases, both the same. Chickens got killed with bees attacking them. I will talk a little bit about that later on. If I don't, it's a thing called F2 aggression, which I will speak about a little bit later this afternoon. Make sure they're stable. And I don't mean anything to do with horses either. Just look at what we've got here. This is a beekeeper, but not the owner. The owner bought some property and decided to keep some bees, and had a look around the internet and decided what they needed. So he decided that they needed double 14 by 12, but let's not worry about that, because I wouldn't expect you folk to know too much about that. There's nobody really that operates their bees on those in that manner. But it made the stands far too high. So poor old Maggie's got to stand on a block to handle the bees. Also, it's dangerous because it could easily tip over. That one is better, but this is ridiculous. Here's another one. I think it was actually only a temporary stand, but if you've got something like this, again, you've got a windscreen wiper effect, because there's quite a lot of bit of leverage when you're removing these boxes. Don't forget they're stuck down by propolis, and all the pressure's going to be that way. Wallop the whole lot. 2 hives on the ground, and probably 2 angry colonies inside them as well. If you're going to fence, make sure the fence is secure. This was cutting off the corner of a field with a barbed wire fence, as you can see here. There is actually a gate just there. You can see the hives knocked over. What had happened is the cattle got through further down, round the back, in through the gap there, and knocked the hives over. I don't think they stayed too long, but there were about 11 hives knocked over there. This is on the allotment. And you can see what the beekeeper's done. They put these posts up and then some netlon round. 1 hive, 2 hives inside on a reasonable stand. This might be an empty box or it might be bees in there. It doesn't really matter. So the bees come out, see the net, and they could just go straight up, overhead height. Absolutely no problem at all. And I know this situation because they were going to move the bees at one stage. That's an old folks' home there, by the way. They were going to move these bees at one stage, and there was an outcry from the other allotment holders who wanted them to stay. This is another allotment, a much bigger allotment, and there are 3 beekeepers keep their bees there. These are polyhives. That's a different kind of polyhive, and that is a wooden hive. There's 3 different beekeepers there. If it was me, I would turn them around the other way so that there's no danger of the bees being a trouble to the allotment holders, because it only takes somebody to be stung by a wasp, and people, when they've been stung, they don't worry too much what they've been stung by. It must be them, not in bees. Another option would be, this was complete wasteland. What they could have done was made a path in there, cut out some of the area here and put the bees in there. But it wasn't my, I was only a visitor. I wouldn't, it's none of my business. But I think they could have improved that quite a bit. Also, where they were, you can see the shadows. These were in full sun, which didn't, in my opinion, do them much good. Here's a converted double garage. The doors are around the other side. In a big town, where are the bees? On top of the roof. Now, if you've got that situation, that's fine, but try to make sure they're not in full sun all the time. You've got the added problem with a hard roof of reflection, heat reflection off the roof as well. I won't say anything about health and safety. I wouldn't bother about it, but of course other people want rails round and all sorts of things like that. Moving bees. Beginners usually have to do it early in their beekeeping life, because of course they've got to get their bees home somehow, or they're delivered, or whatever. It's interesting that somebody asked a question earlier about how far bees fly. Well, of course, it's relevant here. They fly around about 1.5 miles in summer. You're sort of fairly safe with that. And they come back to the same spot. So literally, if you move the hive one side or the other a foot, they will come back to where they were. It won't take them too long to find a new entrance, but that's a different matter. So they're really that accurate at coming back. Now, during the summer, they can remember for around about 3 weeks. Perhaps a little bit more, but around about 3 weeks. And if, let's say, you move a hive, you've got 2 hives close together, and you move one of them either to the other side of the apiary or 1/2 mile away or something like that, the bees will come back to where they used to coming back to, and then they'll fly around a bit and they will go in the closest hive, usually without too much of a problem, because flying bees are usually carrying something, so they'll be accepted. So in the summer, for beginners, move more than 3 miles, so it's 1.5 miles twice. Leave them for 3 weeks, or you can move them 3 feet or less every day. So if you want to move, let's say you got a garden and you put your bees down, and it wasn't the best place, and somewhere else proved a bit better. It was 20 yards away. You could move them a little bit every day, and that wouldn't be a problem. The problem comes, of course, if you buy a hive of bees from the other end of the village. It's only 1/2 mile away, 1/4 mile away or something, and then bringing it back home. During the winter, of course, bees don't fly very far at all, so you will probably be okay. Now, these figures that I've given you here, an experienced beekeeper will know how to get over these sort of things, and you can probably argue that that 3 feet you can expand quite a bit. In fact, I've done it. But for a beginner's point of view, then just look on 3, 3, and 3, and you won't go far wrong. Now, closing up bees, you need to do it. If you're moving bees a long distance, then they will need ventilation. If it's only 1/4 hour, 1/2 hour in a car, you'll probably be okay. You clearly need to block up the entrance. Make sure there's no gaps anywhere else, which is something that not all beekeepers do, much to amusement of others. So just close the entrance up. I've used a bit of foam rubber here, but only because I probably acquired it out of a skip or something of that nature. But you can use grass and hay, or all sorts of things like that. You then need to tie them up and strap them up securely. I've used baler twine there, which I've used for years and years and years, no problem at all. I tend to use a turnkey, which probably around the other sides, but not seen. That's absolutely fine. But if you haven't got any of that, you can buy hive straps. I like these, what I call a toggle hive strap, because there's just one flat plate and you can get them very tight with those. Otherwise, so there's no moving parts. With the other ones, you get like a ratchet movement. And of course, first, you've got extra expense. And secondly, you've got a possibility of something breaking or going wrong. These are absolutely fine. They're only about £3, I think. They're well worth having. And of course, you don't need very many. Essential equipment. You actually don't need very much at all. If you look at catalogues and online and in beekeepers' shops, and all sorts of things like that, you really can be encouraged to buy a whole load of junk and gadgets that really you don't need. Either you don't need them in the first place, or you can improvise with something else. There's many things in beekeeping that people buy, you use once a year, and it really doesn't make much sense to me. There are also some items that are fashionable rather than useful. But the more you get into beekeeping, the more you realise these things happen. I suggest very strongly that if you buy something, you buy good quality. Have a look at it. Don't just buy it online. Have a look, because most of what we buy is a tool. And it doesn't matter whether you're at work or hobby or whatever. If you get tools, unless you just want to buy something for a quick job, use it once and almost chuck it away. You may want to keep using and keep using and keep using and keep using, which of course in beekeeping you're going to do. And I won't knock anybody in particular, but with the rise of the low wage economies, very often things are made by people who don't really know what they're making. In the old days, 30 years plus ago, most of the British manufacturers actually made virtually everything themselves in their own shops. They had woodworking shops, tinsmiths, all sorts of things like that. But now, of course, because it's cheaper to buy it and get it shipped in at great expense to the planet from elsewhere, of course, that's what happens. And I've seen bits that that are so sharp you can cut yourself. So be very, very careful. I suggest very strongly you avoid online unless it's a known supplier and you know the quality and you know that if you send it back, you'll get a response rather than nothing to do with me, Gov. It's all right when it left here. Now, online, the quality can often be poor and more expensive. I've seen stuff online that's more expensive than than buying the good stuff through the catalogues of the better suppliers. So be very, very careful. And a lot of these people, I'm certain, that are selling them, and I won't mention where they come from, but you've all got it, I'm sure. I'm sure a lot of these people aren't actually beekeepers. They've just seen something and they thought, make a quick buck out of this. Hive tool, I'll show you what we use them for in a minute, but we all, I think, need one of those. Pretty useful bit of kit. Obtain a good one. There are two main types, what are called the J type and the nail puller type with a scraper. I'll give photographs in a minute. There are other types, but these are the two main types that are used. Have a look at them. Make sure there is a thin end, and I'll give you a reason why in a minute. They must have a thin end if they're going to be any use. Always keep them handy. I know people put them down or put them in their pockets or everything. If you ever see me handle a colony of bees, I've always got it in my hand, simply because you need it so often. And if it's in your hand, you've got it there. Make sure it's comfortable. Make sure it fits your hand. And there are some very short ones available. Well, they're not very good for levering boxes off. So within reason, you need a fairly long one. If you do buy one that's painted, I find that yellow's easier to see in the grass than all the other colours, red, green, blue, or whatever. That, of course, is a personal thing. Some of them are unpainted stainless steel, probably quite easy to see. Here's the two types. The J type at the top, and you can see why, because of this J round here. That's basically just a flat plate. The scraper type has got the end, bent round like that. I find this area here really useful for scraping propolis and wax off and all sorts of things like this. It's this end that really matters. And I'll show you why, I hope, in a minute. Here we are. Yep. See the difference between that very thin end and that much more blunt end. What you need to do is to push the hive tool between the gaps of the various boxes that are gummed up with bees. This is a lot easier to do than that. So, of course, people waggle it up and down, and I've seen that happen so many times, and all they do is just knock the stuff in out of the boxes. So this is what you need to do. Although that isn't another box, it's the same principle. And this is sort of fairly minor damage, but it's the sort of thing that can happen if you've got blunt hive tools. It just knocks the stuff in at the boxes. Smoker's pretty handy piece of kit. We use it to calm the bees. Now, I know some people don't smoke their bees, but all I'll say is that any colony, in my view, that is going to defend, is any good, is going to defend itself. So if anyone starts ripping their home to bits, they're going to object. If not, they're usually soft bees that really aren't survivors, and they will really need mollycoddling by the beekeeper to keep them going. The other thing is, or one of the other things is, that if you, even the calmest colonies have got a right occasionally to get fired up. If you've got your smoker lit, if you don't want to use it, don't use it. But if anything happens with the bees, you've got the smoker there and you can calm them down again. If not, you'll be running off into the distance with bees after you and bees chasing the neighbours as well. So if anyone says to you, "I'll never smoke my bees," then be wary. I've even seen, I've never seen people that aren't what I call fully booted and suited, who don't smoke. It needs to be a comfortable smoker as well, because it's got bellows on, which I'll show you in a minute, and you need to puff the bellows. If the spring inside is very strong, it's going to make your hand ache. And I have seen some with very strong springs that even I wouldn't use. I'm suggesting to you, always use it. It doesn't have to be great blasts, but just enough to control the colony. Because as I said, if the colony doesn't need controlling, they're probably not very tough bees. And keep it handy too. I always keep mine between my knees, which is subject to great ridicule from a few people. But it's always the ones who've fully booted and suited who never know where their smoker is. That always poke fun at the others. Keep it alight as well, which is not difficult. A lot of beekeepers have problems, but if you lay it down on its side, it will go out in within a minute or so. So what sort of smoker fuel can you use for a smoker? There's a list there. They're all available to most people. And when you got to the bottom, I'm being absolutely serious about that. But of course, it don't give you very much smoker fuel. But what I do is I've got a couple of dogs, as I think you probably found out by now. Their food comes in fairly heavy-duty plastic bags. So if I see any hay left over when farmers cut their hay or dry grass mowings or anything of that nature, I fill up the sacks until I need them. Make sure you keep them out of the way from mice, otherwise you'll end up with mouse nests in them. Wood chippings, I mean chippings, not shavings. Shavings are useless. Wood chippings are good if somebody's had some tree surgery done or tree cut down or something like that. These days they chip the wood. Grab it, grab it. What I do is get seed trays, fill them sort of about half full. You didn't want to be too thick with chippings. Put them in the greenhouse or conservatory or something so they dry out and keep turning them over so they really dry out, and they are good for a smoker fuel. Hessian sacking, we don't get Hessian sacks these days like we used to, but one good source is builders. They use Hessian to keep the frost off their brickwork during the winter, and if you know a bricklayer, there's probably a good source. Touchwood, I think, is absolutely brilliant, and I'll tell you what Touchwood is, because so many people ask me. It's the branches of trees when they go very, very soft. That could be broken up by hand, no trouble at all. So you can see, folks, that there's absolutely no need to buy smoker fuel. And why there's so much of it sold, I've absolutely no idea. But it is, and I'm not here to criticise anyone. If they want to spend their money on something that they can find elsewhere, then that's fine by me. So there's touchwood inside the smoker, just broken up. Look, burns nice and slowly with a cool smoke. Here's the bellows that I was talking about. They try them. Just keep puffing away, because if you handle a few colonies, you don't want your hand aching, because it can be rather unpleasant. This is upright. Laying it over on its side is will make it quiet. There's the nozzle. All that does is a hinge there. It just comes back over the top, and the smoke gets blown out of the nozzle. Going along with the hive tool and smoker's protective equipment. Now, it really is a personal preference. It's entirely up to you what you want, what you have. There are some people that insist on full protection. So it's a full bee suit. It's gloved up to the elbows and Wellington boots on as well, what I call fully booted and suited. One bit of caution about Wellington boots. I know it. Everyone's encouraged to wear them, but I've known people end up in hospital because several bees have got down the Wellington boots, stung through the bee suit, and they've ended up in hospital. So I would be a little bit careful about being fully booted and suited. Why do people do it? Well, safety, because they don't want to get stung, or they don't want anybody else to get stung or whatever. Now, some beekeeping associations insist on being fully booted and suited at meetings. And I turned up at one on one occasion, and I've never worn a bee suit in my life. I turned up on one as an invited demonstrator, and the chairman was not very happy about it. But I wasn't told I had to be fully booted and suited, and if I had been, I'd have declined the invitation. It's assumed by non-beekeepers that all beekeepers wear all this kit. They don't. It's only some of them. So you don't have to have it, all of it. I will explain some that I think are probably more popular. Now, one of the problems is you're completely isolated from the bees, so you don't know what mood they're in, and you don't know when they need a bit more smoke. So other people could be stung, but you clearly aren't. And I was told on one occasion by somebody very high up in beekeeping, position-wise, I'll say, that because it's well known that I've never worn a bee suit or a tunic, which I'll tell you about in a minute, in my life, I shouldn't be teaching beekeepers because I'll give a bad impression. Yeah. Anyway, right. So A lot of people just wear what's appropriate. What is that? Well, personally, I think head protection is a must. When I started keeping bees, probably a quarter of the beekeepers didn't wear a veil at all. I've never known anyone be stung in the eye, but personally, I think that's very dangerous. So I would certainly wear a veil of some description. If you keep your skin exposed, it probably teaches you a lot quicker, because if you're getting the odd sting, you might think to yourself, either you're handling bees a bit rougher than you should, or or you're not smoking them enough. Give them a bit more smoke. And of course, that's one of the benefits that those that are fully booted and suited don't get. Protection will only reduce stings. That's all. It won't prevent. And the reason it will only reduce stings is because if bees get caught up in your clothing, or perhaps it's a little bit of a cool day, they slow down, get a bit sluggish. You take them indoors and either sit on them or put your hand on them or something of that nature. You will get stung. In beekeeping, you will get stung, and you really must understand that, because we do get people come along, whisper green, do you get stung? Well, of course we do. We're playing with bees. Well, we're not playing, we've been dead serious with them. But I'll say to you folk, you use exactly what you want, what you're comfortable in. There's a variety here to give you a little bit of an idea. That person is what I call fully booted and suited, wearing Wellingtons. They got gloves on, they got the suit. That person is sort of divorced from the bees, although it happened to be a demonstrator, but not to worry about that. This one's gone in the other extreme. A veil only, what I call an old-fashioned veil. This is similar to the type that I wear. And knowing the beekeeper, he probably hasn't got any gloves on either. I'm pretty certain he hasn't got any gloves on. So, you know, that is quite adequate. There's no problem at all with that. This is the tunic, which are really popular. The only difference is they're a bit like a bee suit, but they don't have the trouser part, the bottom part. Now, I'll only briefly mention it here because I think I can do it better on another slide. With tunics, you get two types of hoods. You get this sort of flat hat type thing, and then you get the fencing style veil. I think I can show you better with the next photograph or the one after that. And that person has got gloves with fixed gauntlets on. So they're really the sort of options that you've got. This is my local association of Whisper Green. We're in members April. This person here, Martin, who at that point was probably only been keeping bees 4 or 5 years, I would think, something like that. There's a group of us, 10 beekeepers all together, and I know you're counting, but don't forget I was taking the photograph. You got 3 beekeepers with veils only, so you've got Martin there. I can't remember, that's either Maggie or Daisy, and me. Everybody else has probably got tunics on, and it's what they're comfortable on. And I'll repeat, have what you want. I will be talking a little bit more about it, but not much here, apart from saying that this is a round veil, and that's a fencing type veil. It's not a fencing type veil there. All right, so have what you want. There's me handling a colony of bees, and I've never had a problem, and I've always worn a veil of some kind. This one is the one that I like because they're nice and easy. They've got a ring round there, so it keeps the veil away from your face. And apart from about the first 6 weeks of keeping bees, I've only ever worn gloves if I've been asked to, when I've done a demonstration for biosecurity reasons. This is a Valen tunic, which most people think is quite adequate. That's Daisy yet again. I'm told that if you buy one, make sure it's got a detachable hood, because the trick is when you wash it, to take the hood off, stuff it in the sleeve, and it reduces the damage. Not all of them, they've got elasticated sleeves. And so unless you're going to roll your sleeves up, make sure it's got elastic there. And not all of them have got pockets. So, but I'm told, and having seen people wear these things, they are used a lot. It could be, perhaps if your eyesight isn't that great, you can keep a magnifying glass in there. All perhaps a box of matches for lighting your smoke, all sorts of things like that. So bee suit and tunic, and I'm probably the wrong person to advise, but I'm telling you what I've been told. Try it on. I've come across so many people who bought online and there's been a problem with it. You need to make sure it fits you, and it needs to be bigger than you want, because don't forget you're moving around all the time. You're bending over, you're lifting up supers, all sorts of things like that. I'm told that you should buy one size larger than you think you are. So if you think you're medium, then go for a large one. Quality definitely varies a bit, and this is something I do know a little bit about, because I bought most of the bee suits, tunics rather, for Whisper Green apiary. I've also been to lots of other places and seen lots of different kinds of bee suits. Some of them are made out of, you have to excuse my ignorance on material, but it's a little bit like a sort of light canvas. They seem to be the most durable. Yeah, others are a bit like butter muslin or cheesecloth or whatever they call it these days. And of course, it doesn't last very long. Some of them are really cheaply made, but actually quite expensive. Now, I wouldn't rush into buying something anyway, because most beekeeping associations, or quite frankly, any that are worth their salt, if they've got a teaching apiary, they should have adequate or more than adequate protective equipment, whatever you want for you to borrow. Now, that's absolutely great. I don't know if the next, oh yeah, yeah, that's absolutely great, because we have different types at Whisper Green. And the reason we have different types is because we want people to try them on to see which suits them, you know, which type of veil, and, you know, all sorts of things like that. And after they've decided on what they want, one they buy their own, of course, they go and buy one exactly the same. Much better than buying something that you don't like. The hand protection, clearly gloves. Why are they worn? Well, to avoid being stung, which I think really is probably the main reason. But if you're, and I'm being serious again, if you are frightened of being stung, then you really ought to question whether you should be keeping bees, because it's exactly the same as swimming. If you don't like getting wet, don't go swimming. You know, I'm not being stupid here, or being dismissive of anything like that, but I think you will definitely get stung at some stage, and most stings are going to be unexpected. Bees can go up sleeves. I roll my sleeves up, so I haven't got a problem. But that's why people tend to wear gauntlets. And of course, other people wear them just to keep their hands clean. And I won't knock that. So what have we got? Well, we got leather gloves and gauntlets. You can buy leather gloves, in those sort of gardening gloves or whatever. But what the problem with those is they're usually thick, and if they're thick, you end up being clumsy. You can't feel anything. You end up squashing bees, all sorts of things like that. And then people make gauntlets out of things like shirt sleeves or those sort of garments. Household gloves. And when I say household gloves, I mean the ones that begin with M and end in D, the yellow ones, those sort. Although I've been told, but I've no proof, I've been told that there's some supermarket that has their value range or essentials range or whatever they call it, that are as good or better than marigolds. Whether that's correct or not, I don't know. I doubt if they're the same colour. And then, of course, disposable gloves, which you can buy in a box of 100 from almost anywhere, or none at all. And I have to say that most of in fact, I think, all of our demonstrators, I think at Whisper Green, don't wear gloves. And surprisingly, when people come along first time, they see the demonstrator not wearing gloves, and probably half of them don't wear gloves. But I'm not saying you shouldn't wear gloves. I'm not saying you should. That's as I mentioned last slide, a personal. But I've already touched on this. Thick gloves make you clumsy, and these leather gloves and gauntlets usually have got thick gloves. What I didn't mention was that the BBKA, British Beekeepers Association, now have a policy asking suppliers not to include these in beginners packs because, or beginners kits rather, because of the possibility of transmitting disease. I'll just chuck that in case you end up getting one. I suggest very strongly that if you wear rings, finger rings, that you remove them, because if you get stung down from the ring, it won't take very long for your finger to swell up a little bit. Then, of course, you can't get the ring off, and it may have to be cut off. These are leather gloves and gauntlets. See, the beekeeper's got just a tunic there, leather gloves and gauntlets. He was actually a solicitor, so I suppose that's why he probably didn't want to get stung on his hands or get propolis all over his hands. But these are the ones that the BBKA are not keen on. If of course you're using them in your own apiary, disease shouldn't be that much of a problem anyway. These are household gloves, and these are thin disposable latex or whatever, vinyl or whatever they are. I would argue that holes in the ground shouldn't be filled up with things like that. But anyway, that's none of my business really. Now, handling bees, getting around to the practical side now. You need to treat them kindly. Don't forget they are livestock, and I do see some awful handling, even by people sometimes with all the qualifications. They don't seem to understand that, if they treated other animals in the same way, they could end up being in trouble. Bees have got sensors all over their bodies. They sense antenna, legs, exoskeleton, and almost everything else that they've got. So even things like vibrations will set off their sort of defensive mode. Make sure your movements are firm but gentle. Don't make sharp movements, because bees will probably see you as a threat, and will probably let you know. These are the sort of things where I'm much better talking at the audience rather than on the. But what I mean is just that rather than that. Smoke when needed. I know it's easy enough for me to sit here and say that, but experience will tell you when, and so will the bees, when they need a little bit more smoke. Don't give great blasts of smoke that that I do see some people unfortunately give to bees. There's absolutely no need for a lot of it. But I suggest that you handle bees under supervision at first. Don't go charging in and think, oh, I can do this on my own. Have somebody with you Preferably them show you first time round or second time, and then you just copy what they're doing, which of course was the old way of learning, wasn't it? Copying. And I know it's easy for me to say, but if something does go wrong, don't just bolt off into the distance and leave a hive open. Try to smoke the bees, try to calm them, and put everything back and then belt off into the distance. So what do we do as beekeepers then? We don't need to, but I just give the entrance a little bit of smoke, just to let them know I'm coming. Not great wafts of smoke in like some do. And then take the roof off, put your hive tool in this instance, immediately above the queen excluder. So I can lift the supers off, which I've done there. I don't know if I've got any arrows. Oh, yes, yep. I turn the roof upside down because if you put these supers down on a flat roof, you're going to end up with 4 lines of crushed bees. If you do it this way, you've only really got to point contact. Take the queen excluder off and put it down at the front, and take the first frame out and put that down at the front as well. So, and then give the bees just a little bit of smoke. So what have I done? I've got the frame and the queen excluder here. I've got the supers here. Now, think about it. When you're lifting the supers off, you can't see where your feet are. So make sure that the area you're in is clear, so there's no trip hazards. Because if you trip over with a hive of bees in front of you, you might have a bit more help doing your beekeeping than you bargain for. Now, when you take your frames out, this is what you'll be confronted with. And surprisingly, quite a lot of people come in and they're amazed at the number of bees that you get on a comb. That colony is quite densely populated, but it's quite common. Most colonies will have that number of bees. Don't think you're just going to see 4 bees on there and that's it. They're there for a reason. Could be all sorts of things, are keeping the brood warm or whatever. And in the middle here, there's brood on all of that comb. But when the hive's put back together, the temperature is about 34, 35 centigrade Celsius, call it what you like. So there needs to be the bees to keep the brood warm. I've taken a frame out there. If you get good bees, then they should be able to come up on top of the frames like that without any problems at all. As you get experience, you'll be able to tell these things. Some colonies, you get half a dozen bees on top of the combs, and you know you've got to get some smoke into them quick. It's just, you really ought to sort of observe bees, see what's happening, see what they're doing, and act accordingly. You need to be careful. This is the bottom side of a frame. This is a side bar. This is a bottom bar. You need to be careful because of all those bees on there. There's one there that's the queen. Now you can hardly see her. So you need to be aware, if you possibly can, of where the queen is. And also when you put things back, just have a quick glance to see that there's nothing that will get damaged. There is lifting to do. And yes, we do have people come along to Whisper Green saying, oh, I can't lift anything. Well, sorry, but at some stage you might have to. If you do conventional beekeeping, which this is, if you've got a lifting problem, then you probably need to look at one of the other options. Somebody's mentioned a Layens hive. That would be one possible option, although the frames are actually quite big and quite heavy. Top bar hive or one of the longer hives will probably be a better bet, simply because there's not the lifting to do. So what we're looking at lifting, each one of those supers, if it's full of honey, weighs between about 35 and 40 pound. That's 16 to 18 kilos each. Now there's 4 there, but there's probably no more than 10 or 12 kilos in each one, I would have thought. Probably some more than others, but probably I wouldn't have thought it was any more than 50, 60 kilos in that. Oh, and the boxes, yeah, on the roof. Of course, what they should have done was taken the roof off. But imagine I'm there with the smoker, and I'm the director because they're my bees. But that's what we're looking at. A brood chamber, if it's full of honey, that is 55, 60 pound, 25, 27 kilos each. Now, the good news is that beekeepers will very rarely come across that situation. So it's really the supers we're looking at. Now, look at something else, which isn't often considered. In a work situation, females are only allowed to lift 20 kilos unaided and males 25 kilos. So unaided, well, it was when I had my business, might have changed now. But we might have, or I might have heard about it if I had done. Right. So if you've got somebody else to help you or some sort of lifting device, then of course you can have more than that. Obviously, the thing to do is get somebody else to help you, because all the sort of lifting devices I've seen beekeepers use have not been very satisfactory. People lash all sorts of things up. Anyway, get yourself organised. You need to be organised if you can to be a good beekeeper. So make sure everything's uncluttered. I'm handling that colony. That's where I'll be standing. Make sure where my feet are is clear. Unlike that, they've got their hive here, and look at all this stuff down on the ground. So be careful. Any more? Question time. Cool. Minute this time, Richard. We're getting closer. Cool. You got some questions in?
Yeah.
Are you sure you're going to understand them all right?
Well, I don't know. I am from Yorkshire.
Where's that?
Yeah, quite. Are there any suppliers that you would recommend or prefer?
Not online. No, not online. No. No, I've got to be fair to everyone. Sorry.
Would you advise something to protect hives from wind?
Depends where you are. In most places, there's no problem. If you're on a pretty desolate area, hilly and no windbreaks or anything, then yes. I mentioned Orkney earlier, and most people up there have got to protect their hives simply because it's it really is well, it's quite flat, and it's just so much wind, no trees or anything like that. What they tend to do is a modification on putting pallets on end and then putting a fencing stake down through there. That's what they do. If it's in the winter, I know Andrew Abraham's on Colonsay, which is the west coast of Scotland. He uses some sort of black sheeting, which I suspect, but I don't know, is DPC damper, of course. But in general, there's no need, in my view, to protect colonies from wind.
Okay.
I certainly don't. Unless you've got a very windy exposed place, I don't think there's any need to. No.
Okay, this one you have to help me out here because I nipped off, so I missed this bit. Are you saying to try all of these items out and not buy online? Where can we buy these items in shops, and what type of shops?
Oh, right. Right. The main suppliers, if let's say you go to a local association and you found, just for argument's sake, uh, manufacturer ABC, their model 679, 678 sort of thing is a good one. Yeah, then get it then get it online. But I think there are so many poor ones out there that you'll end up regretting buying. You may end up regretting buying things. Now, also there are agents in a lot of places, sometimes where you may not notice them. So go along to your local association and speak to beekeepers there and find out where they buy things. Otherwise, if you buy online, it doesn't fit. You've got all the hassle of sending it back, and if you order something on a Tuesday, just for argument's sake, to go and have a look at your bees on the Saturday, and it turns up on the Friday morning, and it's no good. You've got a problem, haven't you? But there are agents around. Also, there are several beekeeping events where you can go and buy things, like the National Honey Show. I know that's in Surrey, so people in the south of England can go and have a look there. You get things like the various conventions, there's the Scottish conventions, there's Ulster. Gormanston Week in Southern Ireland is a really good week for beekeepers. It's the only week-long beekeeping course in the world, and it's structured there. And so even beginners can go, and they can learn. And there's usually 3 or 4 suppliers there. Okay, it's not that much, but you may have problems getting things back on the aircraft. That might be a bit of a problem, but if you're in Ireland, yeah, go there. There's in person, there's a Welsh convention, there's a Scottish convention, so you can go to places. And of course, one of the bigger suppliers has got outlets in several places throughout the country.
Super. I don't know whether or not you covered this, and if Emma was just a bit quick with a question. What is in the smoker? What exactly are we smoking the bees with? Did you cover what you could put in the smoker?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I put a list down,
yeah,
which included dry grass, wood chippings, touchwood.
Super. Anita asks, can you use straw in your smoker?
Yep. Yeah, of course you can. Yeah. Yeah. The thing is with straw and hay, what I tend to do is get the smoker alight with them, because then you can put other stuff on top, which is got more body to it. Straw and hay do actually burn out quite quickly. Both of them, I found, can get quite hot too. Whereas touchwood, you get a nice cool smoke. You can put your hand over the end of the nozzle and you won't get burnt. But if you put hay in, yeah, you can get sparks come out and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you recommend 2 hives?
I'll be going through that.
Yeah. Super.
Yeah. Yeah. That was asked this morning several times. Yeah. Okay.
If you use a mower around your hives to keep the grass down, will this annoy the bees?
I don't usually mow around my hives, but I know people who have had problems. Well, what can you do? You could wait till it's all dusk, and then close the bees up for a few minutes, or smoke them. I think if you smoke them, I think you'll be okay. Just smoke the entrance. That's all. A little bit of smoke across the entrance. You should be okay. Personally, depending on how high you've got them off the ground, personally, I like a bit of vegetation, like I've got on this photograph here. And the reason for that is that if the bees flop down on on the ground before they get to the entrance, they can usually climb up and get back in the hive, whereas they may not if you've got short grass. But that's only a personal thing.
Best time of day to check your bees?
Sorry?
Best time of day to check your bees?
Anyone when it's light. Yeah, I know some books say that you check them midday because then all the bees are out, but it doesn't work quite like that. If bees are flying, it's okay to inspect them. It really doesn't matter.
Where do dead drones go?
Been died really. But if it's towards the end of the year when they're basically chucked out, they really just get thrown out the entrance and that's it. And then of course the scavengers come along and pick them up. I assume some of them die out in the out in the field, really, flying around, I assume.
Yeah. What do you think to using a water spray instead of smoke?
Yeah, you can do. Yep. I've only used it very, very rarely, but I find smoker is fine. If you want to use a water spray, use water spray.
Again, one that I'm not too sure about. When you turn the entrances of the hives around to divert the bees away from particular areas, will the bees not come back on themselves into these areas?
Ah, right. Okay. When you either open a hive up or you move it or something like that, bees get disorientated and they know that something's gone wrong. Of course, they don't know that you've either moved them or you've opened them up or whatever. It's almost as if a tree split open or trees come down or whatever. And if you look closely at a bee on the back end of it, there's a little narrow, lighter coloured band. That's called a Nasonov gland. It gives off a pheromone. And what bees do is if you open the hive up or the entrance is moved or something like that, they raise their back ends, expose the Nasonov gland and fan their wings over the top of it. Now, I like the Americans' expression for it. They term it a come hither pheromone. And I think that's right. So if you let's say move a hive 3 feet, what bees would do, or you turn it round or something like that, what bees would do is they will fan and to draw the others back to their new position. I hope that answers the question.
We're going to have to break soon, but have you ever heard of badgers being a problem or woodpeckers or anything?
Badgers, of course, they use the same track for years and years and years. So if you put your hives on a badger run, they will try and go straight through. I've only ever known one instance of somebody whose beehive got turned over by a badger to get the honey inside. And I have to say, I was a little bit dubious when they told me. I've never really known them been that much of a problem, Richard. Woodpeckers, yes. And I will be talking about them a bit later.
Excellent.
Okay.
Let's go and make a cup of tea back at 2:30.
And the same for everybody else too. Yeah. Okay.